So whenever you see me present before, I usually dance around the stage, but because I'm presenting lots of stats and facts, I actually have to stand behind a lectern today and be all very official. So I'm here to talk about the slightly terrifying subject of art. And actually sort of looking at the art of the craft that's going into platforms. Like we said, well, I have an amazing job. I'm really very fortunate to work with a great team of people across the whole region. And we look at really what does great work look like across platforms? What is the potential for creativity across platforms? And really, what is it we should be doing to start to be adapting our processes and our understanding of what we can do? And today I'm going to talk you through a bit of what I see, and then also talk you through some research which is literally just finished in the last couple of days. So we've got some stats and facts to bring forward as well. So before we get going, I'm just going to talk about New York quickly, just take you back to New York. So when I was younger, I did a lot of traveling. I went around the world, but I'd never been to New York. It was somewhere that held a bit of kind of a mythical, magical place in my mind. It was somewhere that I'd always wanted to visit. And in my early 20s, I was posted there by work for about 3 months. And it was something, as an experience, I was really excited and anticipating. And it's something that I think probably changed a lot of my outlook on life and changed the way in which I operate and the stuff that I've done. Nothing says New York better than a couple of puppies, right? So everything I was exposed to felt new. It felt fresh. It was completely different. There was an energy, there was a vibrancy, there was a creativity to the whole place that made me see things through a totally different lens. It was something which has made me bring through in sort of the creative work that I've done and the industries I've gone through and the things that I've approached. It is that vibrancy, it is that energy that I think it was really exciting at that point. But it's also what New York represented for me. And New York, I think, as this metaphor is amazing. And a lot of what the images that are on Instagram, a lot of the images that are on great platforms, really do that transportative job. They take you somewhere. They do that place of actually bringing you forward into a role, into another environment. And they're able to do a lot of that job that I had to do really by traveling from a long way. So this is something I'm going to talk about a lot today. We're going to talk about where we go, what we do, how people see us. And as far as when we act on these platforms, really looking at how both the people in the community of the platform and also brands need to play a key role in this environment. Making sure that we really respect and we are additive in that experience. This is something that I think is true across all platforms. When we look at platforms, the necessity is really to be adding value, to be making sure that that experience that everyone gets as they're scrolling through their feed is something that's really something that you're respecting their time. You're giving something that is a reward for that moment. Think about how many of you now, on your way to work, as you get up in the morning, as you're going around your whole environment, think about the framing of that. Think about that square frame. Think about that coffee cup. Think about your kids in the park. Think about your life in general. The way in which we see the world has this inherently visual lens. It's the ways in which our brain's wired. It's the way in which we see things generally. And the ability for us to decode things is that much faster through this visual framework. There's something else happening here too. The amount of exposure we're getting to these type of images isn't just flattening out creativity. I think it's making us more aware of beauty in everyday things. And it's giving us the tools to capture, to share, and distribute our lens, our view of the world. What I don't want any of this to sound like, though, is a democratization. One of the things that I worry about, one of the things that I think is talked about, is about how creativity is being democratized. I would say it's completely the opposite to that. I'd say there's a vast acceleration in creativity. That by putting these tools in people's hands, we're giving them the opportunity to really appreciate and see creativity through a totally different lens. I think that's really exciting because it moves from democratization, which is a flattening out and normalization, to something which is really seeing a rising, rapid rate of change and sort of that widespread appreciation for great creative. This is a collective effort, but it's underpinned by personal value systems. It's something which is hard to pin down, and I see lots of people trying to. I see lots of top 10 lists. I see lots of, this is the way in which you should post work on Facebook, on Instagram, across the net. I don't think anybody can possibly write that list because it's too hard. Because of this collective and this personal role. I think there's lots of things that we see through. There's some emergent trends. But I think a lot of this, and it's kind of a paradoxical world of craft and chaos, where absolutely we're looking for people to express themselves through this brilliant lens, but ultimately they're going to judge this in the way in which is relevant to them. And I think that's really exciting. It's moving to genuinely beauty being in the eye of the beholder. Brands who are trying to define these rules, brands who are trying to hold on to what good creative looks like and codify and normalize, are finding they're changing. There's no good. Well, there's lots of goods. Goods is changing in a vastly different form of being able to put that down. It's shifting, it's nebulous, and above all, it's personal. So pinning it down, I think, is something which people spend a lot of time doing, and I wish you'd really put the effort into, and that's what I'm passionate about, is doing and trying and learning and see what people like, and actually really focus in on that as the opportunity. Nothing says creativity more than Kim Kardashian, I think everyone would agree. So I read this amazing article after the Met Ball the other week, the Met Ball in New York, from a publication that will go unnamed, and this really sniffy writer described a disturbing new cult of dressing not for the red carpet, but for maximum likes on Instagram, and that certain celebrities have got it completely wrong. And I think it's fascinating. I think absolutely there can be these calls, and the point on this is that people who have always been around and have a great eye or have authority, super. But I think that everybody has a role to play. So it moves from an objective standard of individuals deciding good or bad to something which you move to a place in which there's far greater views. And I think far greater views can only be a good thing. That collective standard, that community for really driving the industry forward. Conversely, Susie Menkes over at Vogue, and she's the international editor there. She's a person who I think really gets it, and she remembers when it would be about 4 months from that influence from the catwalk would be getting into store. That was the way in which it was very controlled, it was very, very set out, it was very exclusive of who got into a catwalk show and didn't. I think part of the fashion industry are doing a fantastic job at really embracing the platforms and understanding how they can project those images out. Like Susie, when she's on the front row of a catwalk, a really exclusive place, and she can post images out to 100,000 people on her Instagram feed immediately. And they're sometimes chaotic, these images. They're coming from lots of different places. Sometimes they're quite contradictory in how they're coming through. But they're valid and they're valuable. And they help provide us a view on the world. And they help us all try and take this forward. And because that creative lens, I think, can come from multiple different places. So the cliche that is about to come out, and what I'm going to say is hopefully the most blindingly obvious thing, is that what we've done and what everybody's spent a lot of time doing, and I think this is true of digital in general, and it shows the age of the industry. In fact, our boss is 31 today, which is quite a shocking stat. That we really look at this in a way of, what does the technology do? What's the platforms doing? What's the new thing that's come out? What's this little piece, this widget or gizmo or thing that's happening about it? Focusing back down on people, focusing back down on insights, focusing back down on who they are, what they want, what's interesting to them, shifts the form of the creativity massively. It makes a total different approach. And you sit with brands, and I work with some of the best agencies and brands around the world. We've had this obsession about creating things which have been very digitally focused or disruptive. When we stop doing that and we look at things through a people-focused lens and create really interesting, valuable things for them, it shifts the whole work forward to an enormous degree. So Instagram's a very young company. It's only about five years old, and we have just over 300 million people on the platform and growing amazingly. People sharing about 70 million photos a day. And we're growing up. We're having to do some research. And so we conducted this amazing piece of research with Sparkler, with 5,000 people across the UK, France, and Germany, about 1,600 people in the UK. And we're really looking at sort of the form of creativity on the platforms, what it is that people look for and what they're going to do. So I'm about to hit you with loads of stats and facts, which is not my normal style, but here we go. We saw that there are about 3 different types of lens that people view Instagram through. It's a way of seeing images on the platforms and understanding that form of creativity. First is the aesthetic lens. Really unsurprising, but we learned that the environment of Instagram is an additive element for the medium. Simply put, people think images on Instagram look better because they're on Instagram, which is interesting, right? And it's stuff that people may have instinctively felt, but the research really goes out to dig into this and prove it forward. What we did was we took the same 3 images and we tested them across multiple different platforms, across 5 different platforms. We were able to get respondents to rate those images and both from a qual and quant perspective, be able to codify some of what they were seeing about that, such that people would see images on Instagram were more beautiful or stylish compared to other platforms. This is chair. Instagram has a kind of transformative power, it would seem. It kind of confers a layer of legitimacy. I look at it a bit like a gallery, which automatically enhances kind of the prestige of the work by the kind of the cultural authority it provides. And I work with a number of different galleries. And I think it's fascinating the role of the images that can play and the curation, the thinking of how people curate those experiences and what they provide for people at that moment, the stories that they tell. But what was interesting is that, and just we dug into that piece around galleries, and about a fifth of all the people on that we spoke to see Instagram as potentially kind of the gallery of the future, and that's the way in which they go to get their art and get their hit from that as well. Also, people saw Instagram images as being more artistic and creative. Because they were coming through on Instagram. And this is partly how people see their world and how they're projecting this image of them as well. And they believe that about a third of people believe there's a real art in a great post. And actually they look for things that are Instagram worthy, which I think is a piece of language, and the way in which they are projecting and filtering their world is a very interesting role as far as how the community plays on the platform. So there's certainly an aspiration and idealized role that comes across from Instagram. And third of the daily viewers or people on Instagram see it as kind of an advertisement for their life. It's the way in which they're projecting themselves out. And somebody did this really lovely quote in which they said that it's like walking down a high street and every shop is one that I love. So that environment and the role that they need to play in it, that responsibility to play within the community, is something that people take very seriously. And that's that personal investment in the post, the personal investment that put into that time into the platform, means that it makes for the work and sets this crazy high bar in there. It also means that people analyze work in a different way. And in the research, we included posts from brands as well, and we had a retailer in there, a UK retailer. And a lot of their work, I think, has been lovely. But one of the posts that we put up into the research actually drew quite a lot of negative reaction. And when we dug into it, it was because in the picture, 2 of the shoes were really badly misaligned as they sat down. And people have this ability to decode what's going on and very quickly are choosing good and bad. And because of their appreciation, their growing confidence in creative, that ability to choose and see through what is good and bad is something that they're very keen and open to add judgment from, both from themselves and with other people. So whereas the aesthetic lens is about the beauty, the collective lens, which is the next one, is about our community. Instagram is open, it's simple, and it's an egalitarian platform. Over a quarter of users believe that the art is accessible to everyone. And I think we've seen the implications of that, I think, are far-reaching on the creative industry. But it's incredible to see what happens when the Instagram community shares. And it is a real community. It's very much, and this isn't us owning Instagram. The Instagram community are the people who own and they curate, and they really drive the future of the way in which the platform works. You look at what it drives as far as action for people as well. There was a model that we spoke to during the research. And he saw this image, and he goes through Instagram on a daily basis to look at curating his look, his style, the clothes, how he should be operating, and what other people are doing in the market. And he loved this. He loved sort of the style that came through in this image, but he loved the photographer as well. And his immediate reaction was to go and message the photographer. And he's straight away taken that action, and he's now working with that photographer and going out there and doing shoots with him himself. And a third of the users actually agree that the platform makes inspiring creative available to everybody. So this ability for us to then take that, make it available to everybody, and people actually acting onto it is really interesting. It's moving from this passive experience. People talk about platforms and mobile phones as something, as kind of an escapism. I'm just on my phone scrolling through things. It means it's kind of taking away from reality, and I think it does quite the opposite. I think it actually accelerates people into doing stuff. That discovery mode moves from that passive mode of stepping back to really stepping forward. And it inspires them to do stuff. Which takes us to our final piece. And the final lens that we're talking about. This inspiration exchange. That's how a lot of people actually talked about Instagram. Throughout the research, that's the way in which people were kind of framing their understanding of it. Where people and the members of the community come together with this shared passion to really engage together. So we talked to one, again, during the research, we talked to somebody, and she had just seen this image of her friend on Instagram, and she didn't know. He was a musician, and he just posted this up of himself at Radio 1. He's just breaking, he's doing really well. And she said she sees a lot of these images, and she's like, it actually drives her in a very different way. And it shows her that from an inspiration perspective, her ability to work hard and double down means that she can really actually get out there and do something, and it pays off. People sharing their stories, people being able to project that image of self is really important to the community, because it's a great framework for how people actually act in the world. So, sorry, I realise I'm running out a bit of time as well. We also saw this as well. So this was an image, and we had a fantastic artist throughout the research, and many different artists were the respondents. He was telling us a story of seeing this image, and actually got him to go and dig out all his old painting, and he's an amazing sculptor. And he's actually using it to inspire to go and create more work. He's actually starting to create work that he hasn't done in years. Inspiring action, moving people from that passive to active. I think that's a real shift in the way in which people are seeing platforms working. And it adds up to actually a bit of an emotional big bang. It adds up to something which is potentially one of the most emotionally resonant platforms in the world. And half of the respondents were really talking about what it elicits, and it makes them laugh, it makes them cry, it makes them dream, it makes them think. Pushing people to do stuff, pushing for the people for that emotional reaction, I think is a really interesting challenge. It comes from that aesthetic, it's born out of the community and driven from that inspiration that comes through from the work. We tested this through this point. I spoke about this presenter effect. The presenter effect was taking common images and mapping them across platforms. We mapped them across Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and Pinterest. And showing people these images in the platform was able, and it's a kind of experimental testing method that Sparkler were running, but it was fascinating to see that kind of reaction that people got. When you look at how people reacted to the images on Instagram, they thought they were 20% more cooler, they were 50% more inspiring, they were twice as creative, and almost 3 times as more imaginative and distinctive. These things that are not just a place in which you can go and take up time, it moves it to a place in which people are actually doing, thinking, feeling, acting from it. And I'm really excited because what it puts is a people-focused lens around it. It shifts it from this digital focus and this point around focusing on mobile as something different to mobile being something truly fundamental. The other thing that I think is interesting was that it was seen as a happy place. And I'm pleased that it's seen as a happy place. It's seen as that it's overwhelmingly positive. People actually draw happiness from the platform. It makes them happy. They want to bring happiness back to the platform. It feels like part of the responsibility of the community. And that feeling of well-being after being on there is really important. And that's something that we see coming through really strongly in the research. So it's not about escapism from our mundane lives. It's about stimulating desires that drive us to do and try new things. It's about connecting with people that truly have the power to move us in unexpected ways. There's still a lot we don't know. There's still a lot that everyone doesn't know. And by no means are we coming here today to try and dictate any rules or anything that might be said. I think what it is opening up is the opportunity for everybody, creatively, within the brand world, to look at the potential of all of these platforms and to look at the potential of Instagram and say, how do I need to act as a responsible citizen within that community? What's the value that I bring? What do I add when I'm on there? How do I respect this aesthetic lens? But how does it add back to the brand? How is the brand acting with purpose and acting in a way in which we give something back in every interaction, respecting that time, respecting people in a way in which we give them relevant, rewarding work, using it in a way in which is also inspiring to you. Creating work for these platforms, I think, is really exciting. The responsiveness, of course, is fascinating. That ability, the judgment of the community to say good and bad is something which, from a creative perspective, from a creative industry perspective, is something that we need to be present in and not abstracted from if we're really, truly going to get the best out of it. Above all else, what I loved about this research and what I love about it is it really is this focus back on people. Start with people, start with that opportunity that it provides for them, and this ever-growing community will help drive creative forward. And it's something that I'm looking forward to be able to work with you all on. And as we build out this research, as we build out our understanding of the platform, we'll be able to come back to the market with more insights and be able to bring more of that humanity forward. But I hope that everybody looks forward to be able to taking the opportunity of working with Instagram and something that we're very keen and excited to do to push this creative potential, where the bar is high and the bar is a place that we've talked about being ever changing. The responsibility on everybody on the creative industry is really to help be a responsible part of that community and push it even further. And a couple of minutes over, I think that's all from me. Thank you very much.